Raising his arms high above his head, the boy filtered the brilliant light through his fingers. My blood, he cried, it's the same color as the sun's blood. Clapping his hands as he would at a shrine to summon the deity, he bowed his head in silent obeisance, thinking, the monkeys have a mother, I have none. But I have this goddess, they have none. The revelation filled him with joy, and as he burst into tears, he seemed to hear from beyond the clouds the music of the shrine dances. The drums boomed in his ears, while the counterpoint of the flutes hovered around the melody of the dance of Iwato. His feet caught the rhythm, his arms swayed gracefully. From his lips came the words he had memorized only the night before. The caterpillar bow, with each coming of spring, I hope to see the dancing of the myriad of gods. Oh, how I hope to see their dancing. Suddenly, realizing Musashi had gone on ahead, he abandoned his dance and ran to catch up. The morning light barely penetrated the forest they now entered. Here, in the approach to the inner shrine, the cryptomerias were of enormous circumference and all about the same height. Tiny white flowers grew in the thick patches of moss clinging to the trees, suspecting the trees were ancient, 500 years old, perhaps even 1,000. Iori had an urge to bow to them. Here and there, bright red vine maple caught his eye. Low stripped bamboo encroaching on the road narrowed it to a path. Without warning, the earth seemed to tremble under their feet. Close upon the thunderous report came an unnerving scream and a cascade of sharp echoes. Iori covered his ears with his hands and dived into the bamboo. Iori, stay down, Musashi commanded from the shadow of a large tree. Don't move even if they trample on you. The gloomy half-light seemed infested with lances and swords. Because of the scream, the attackers thought at first the bullet had found its mark, but there was no body in sight. Uncertain as to what had happened, they froze. Iori was at the center of a cycle of eyes and unsheathed blades. In the deathly silence that followed, curiosity got the better of him. He slowly raised his head above the bamboo. Only a few feet away, a sword blade, extending from behind a tree, caught a flash of sunlight. Losing all control, Iori screamed at the top of his lungs. Sensei, somebody's hiding there. As he shouted, he jumped to his feet and made a dash for safety. The sword leaped from the shadows and hung like a demon above his head. But only for an instant. Musashi's dagger flew straight to the swordsman's head and lodged in the temple. Yeah! One of the priests charged at Musashi with his lance. Musashi caught the lance and held it tightly with one hand. Another death cry sounded, as if the man's mouth were full of rocks. Wondering if his attackers could be fighting among themselves, Musashi strained his eyes to see. The other priest took careful aim with his lance and hurtled toward him. Musashi caught this lance too and held it securely under his right arm. Jump him now, screamed one of the priests, realizing that Musashi had his hands full. His voice stentorian, Musashi shouted, "Who are you? Identify yourselves, or I will assume you are all enemies. It's a shame to spill blood on this holy ground, but I may have no choice." twirling the lances around and sending the two priests off on different tangents. Musashi whipped out his sword and finished off one of them before he had stopped tumbling. Spinning around, he found himself confronting three more blades lined up across the narrow path. Without pausing, he moved toward them threateningly, one step at a time. Two more men came out and took their places shoulder to shoulder beside the first three. As Musashi advanced and his opponents retreated, he caught a glimpse of the other Lancer priest who had recovered his weapon and was chasing Iori. "Stop, you cutthroat!" But the moment Musashi turned to go to Iori's rescue, the five men let out a howl and charged. Musashi rushed head on to meet them. It was like the collision of two raging waves, but the spray was blood, not brine. Musashi kept whirling from opponent to opponent with the speed of a typhoon. Two blood-curdling cries, then a third. They fell like dead trees. Each sliced through the middle of the torso. In Musashi's right hand was his long sword, in his left the short one. With cries of terror, the last two turned and ran, Musashi close behind them. "Where do you think you are going?" he shouted, splitting one man's head open with a short sword. The black spot of blood caught Musashi in the eye. Reflexively, he raised his left hand to his face and in that instant heard a strange metallic sound behind him. He swung his long sword to deflect the object, but the effect of the action was very different from the intention. Seeing the ball and chain wrapped around the blade near the sword guard, he was seized with alarm. Musashi had been taken off guard. "Musashi!" shouted Baiken. He pulled the chain taut. "Have you forgotten me?" Musashi stared for a moment before exclaiming, "Shishido Baiken from Mount Suzuka. That's right. My brother Tama's calling you from the Valley of Hell. I'll see that you get there quick." Musashi could not free his sword. By slow degrees, Baiken was taking in the chain and moving closer to make use of the razor-sharp sickle. As Musashi looked for an opening for his short sword, he realized with a start that if he had been fighting with only his long sword, he would be utterly defenseless now. Baiken's neck was so swollen it was nearly as thick as his head. With a strained cry, he jerked powerfully on the chain. Musashi had blundered. He knew that. The ball chain sickle was an unusual weapon, but not unfamiliar to him. Years earlier, he had been struck by admiration when he had first seen the hellish device in the hands of Baiken's wife, but it was one thing to have seen it, something else to know how to counter it. Baiken gloated, a broad evil grin spreading over his face. Musashi knew there was only one course open to him. He had to let go of his long sword. He looked for the right moment. With a ferocious howl, Baiken leaped and swept the sickle toward Musashi's head, missing by only a hair's breadth. Musashi released the sword with a loud grunt. No sooner had the sickle been withdrawn than the ball came whirring through the air. Then the sickle, the ball, the sickle. Dodging the sickle put Musashi right in the path of the ball. Unable to get close enough to strike, he wondered frantically how long he could keep it up. "Is this it?" he asked. The question was conscious. But as the tension increased, his body became difficult to control and his responses purely physiological. Not only his muscles, but his very skin was struggling instinctively. Concentration became so intense, the flow of oily sweat stopped. Every hair on his body stood on end. It was too late to get behind a tree. If he made a dash for it now, he would probably run into another foe. He heard a clear, plaintive cry and thought, oh, Iori. He wanted to look, but in his heart gave the boy up for lost. Die, you son of a bitch. The crying came from behind Musashi. Then, Musashi, why are you taking so much time? I am taking care of the vermin behind you. Musashi didn't recognize the voice but decided he could focus his attention on biking alone. To Baiken, the most important factor was his distance from his opponent. His effectiveness depended on manipulating the length of the chain. If Musashi could move a foot beyond the reach of the chain or approach a foot near, Baiken would be in trouble. He had to make sure that Musashi did neither. Musashi marveled at the man's secret technique, and as he marveled, it suddenly struck him that here was the principle of the two swords. The chain was a single length, the ball functioned as the right sword, the sickle as the length. As the left, of course, he cried triumphantly. That's it. That's the Yaegaki style. Now confident of victory, he leaped back, putting 5 feet between the two of them. He transferred his sword to his right hand and hurled it straight as an arrow. Baiken twisted his body and the sword glanced off, burying itself in the roof of a nearby tree. But as he twisted, the chain wrapped itself around his torso. Before he could even cry out, Musashi slammed his full weight into him. Baiken got his hand as far as the hilt of his sword, but Musashi broke his hold with a sharp chop to the wrist. In a continuation of the same motion, he drew the weapon and split Baiken open, like lightning splitting a tree. As he pulled the blade down, he twisted ever so slightly. What a pity, thought Musashi. As the story was later told, he even uttered a sigh of compassion as the originator of the Yaegaki style breathed his last. The karatake slice, exclaimed an admiring voice. Straight down the trunk, no different from splitting bamboo. It's the first time I've ever seen it. Musashi turned and said, Why, if it isn't Konosuke from Kiso, what are you doing here? It has been a long time, hasn't it? The god of Mitsumine must have arranged it, perhaps with the aid of my mother, who taught me so much before she died. They fell to chatting, but Musashi suddenly stopped and cried, Iori, he's all right. I rescued him from that pig of a priest and had him climb a tree. Iori, watching them from a high branch, started to speak but instead shaded his eyes and looked toward a small flat area beyond the edge of the forest. Kuro, tied to a tree, had caught Oko's kimono sleeve with his teeth. She yanked desperately at the sleeve. In a trice it tore off and she ran away. The lone survivor, the other priest, was hobbling along, leaning heavily on his lance, blood flowing from a head wound. The dog, perhaps crazed by the smell of blood, started making a terrible racket. The noise echoed and re-echoed for a time, but then the rope gave way, and the dog went after Oko. When he reached him, the priest lifted his lance and aimed for the dog's head. Wounded in the neck, the beast ran into the woods. That woman's getting away, cried Iori. Never mind, you can come down now. There's an injured priest over there. Shouldn't you catch him? Forget it, he doesn't matter anymore. "That woman's probably the one from the Oinu tea house," said Konosuke. He explained his presence, the heaven-sent coincidence that had enabled him to come to Musashi's assistance. Deeply grateful, Musashi said, "You killed the man who fired the gun?" "No," Konosuke smiled. "Not me, my stuff. I knew ordinarily you could take care of men like that, but if they were going to use a gun, I decided I'd better do something. So I came here ahead of them and slipped up behind the man while it was still dark." They checked the corpses. 7 had been killed with a staff, only 5 with a sword. Musashi said, "I haven't done anything except defend myself, but this area belongs to the shrine. I feel I should explain things to the government official in charge, then he can ask his questions and get the incident cleared up." On their way down the mountain, they ran into a contingent of armed officials at the bridge at Kosaruzawa. Musashi told his story. Get the captain in charge listened, seemingly puzzled, but nevertheless ordered Musashi tied up. Shocked, Musashi wanted to know why, since he was on his way to report to them in the first place. "Get moving," ordered the captain. Angry as Musashi was about being treated as an ordinary criminal, there was still another surprise coming. There were more officials farther down the mountain. By the time they arrived in the town, his guard numbered no fewer than 100. Brother disciples, come now, no more tears. Konosuke hugged Iori to his chest. "You are a man, aren't you?" "It's because I'm a man that I'm crying." He lifted his head, opened his mouth wide and bawled at the sky. They didn't arrest Musashi, he gave himself up. Konosuke's mild words masked his own deep concern. "Come on, let's go now." "No, not until they bring him back." "They will let him go soon. They will have to." "Do you want me to leave you here by yourself?" Konosuke walked a few paces away. Iori didn't move. Just then, Biken's dog came charging out of the woods, his muzzle a dull bloody red. "Help!" screamed Iori, running to Konosuke's side. "You are worn out, aren't you? Look, would you like me to carry you piggyback?" Iori, pleased, mumbled his thanks, climbed on the proffered back and wrapped his arms around the broad shoulders. With the festival over the night before, the visitors had departed. A gentle breeze wafted bits of bamboo wrapping and scraps of paper along the deserted streets. Passing the Oinu tea house, Konosuke glanced inside, intending to go by unnoticed. But Iori piped out, "There's the woman who ran away. I imagine that's where she would be." He stopped and wondered aloud. If the officials dragged in Musashi, why didn't they arrest her too? When Oko saw Konosuke, her eyes blazed with anger. Seeing she seemed to be hurriedly gathering her belongings together, Konosuke laughed. "Going on a trip?" he asked. "None of your business. Don't think I don't know you, you meddling scoundrel. You killed my husband. You brought it on yourselves. I will get even one of these days." "She-demon!" Iori shouted over Konosuke's head. Retreating into the back room, Oko laughed scornfully. "You are fine ones to be saying bad things about me when you are the thieves who broke into the treasure house." What's this? Konosuke let Iori slide to the ground and went into the tea house. "Who are you calling thieves? You can't fool me." "Say that again." "And thieves." As Konosuke grabbed her arm, she turned and stabbed at him with a dagger. Not bothering with his staff, he wrested the dagger from her hand and sent her sprawling through the front door. Oko jumped up and screamed, "Help! Thieves! I'm being attacked!" Konosuke took aim and hauled the dagger. It entered her back and the point came out in front. Oko pitched forward onto her face. From nowhere, Kuro bounded forth and was at the body, first slurping blood hungrily, then lifting his head to howl at the sky. Look at those eyes! Exclaimed Iori in horror. Ogo's cry of thieves had caught the ears of the excited villagers. Some time before dawn, someone had broken into the temple treasure house. It was clearly the work of outsiders, for the religious treasures, all sorts, mirrors, and the like, had been left untouched, but a fortune in gold dust, bullion, and cash accumulated over a period of many years was missing. The news had leaked out slowly and was still unconfirmed. The effect of Oko's scream, the most tangible proof so far, was electric. There they are inside the Oinu. The cries attracted a still larger mob, armed with bamboo spears, boar guns, sticks, and rocks. In no time it seemed that the whole village was surrounding the tea house, thirsty for blood. Konosuke and Iori ducked out the back and for the next several hours were driven from hiding place to hiding place. But now they had an explanation. Musashi had been arrested not for the crime he was about to confess, but as a thief. It was not until they reached Shomaru Pass that they shook off the last of the search parties. You can see Musashino plain from here, said Iori. I wonder if my teacher's alright. I imagine he's in prison by now and being questioned. Isn't there any way to save him? There must be. Please do something, please. You don't have to beg, he's like a teacher to me too. But Iori, there's not much you can do here. Can you make it back home by yourself? I suppose so, if I have to. Good. What about you? I'm going back to Chichibu. If they refuse to release Musashi, I will get him out some way, even if I have to tear the prison down. For emphasis, he thumped the ground once with his staff. Iori, who had seen the power of this weapon, quickly nodded his agreement. That's a boy. You go back and watch over things until I bring Musashi home safe and sound. Placing his staff under his arm, he turned back toward Chichibu. Iori didn't feel lonely or afraid, nor did he worry about getting lost, but he was dreadfully sleepy, and as he walked along under the warm sun, he could hardly keep his eyes open. At Sakamoto, he saw a stone Buddha by the wayside and lay down in its shadow. The evening light was fading when he awoke and heard soft voices on the other side of the statue. Feeling rather guilty about eavesdropping, he pretended he was still asleep. There were two of them, one sitting on a tree stump, the other on a rock. Tied to a tree a little distance away were two horses with lacquer boxes suspended from both sides of their saddles. A wooden tag attached to one of the boxes said, "From Shimotsuke Province, for use in the construction of the West Encirclement, lacquerware supplier to the shogun." To Iori, who now peeked around the statue, they did not look like the normal run of well-fed castle officials. Their eyes were too sharp, their bodies too muscular. The older one was a vigorous-looking man of more than 50. The last rays of the sun reflected strongly from his bonnet-like hat, which came down over both ears and projected out in front, concealing his features. His companion was a slender, wiry youth wearing a faux lock that suited his boyish face. His head was covered with a suo-dye hand towel tied beneath his chin. "How about the lacquerware boxes?" the younger one asked. "That was pretty good, wasn't it?" Yes, that was clever, making people think we are connected with the work going on at the castle. I wouldn't have thought of that myself. I will have to teach you these things little by little. Careful now, don't start making fun of your elders. But who knows, maybe in 5 or years, maybe in 4 or 5 years, old Daiser will be taking orders from you. Well, young people do grow up. Old people just get older, no matter how hard they work at staying young. Do you think that's what I'm doing? It's obvious, isn't it? You are always thinking of your age, and that's what makes you so devoted to seeing your mission accomplished. You know me pretty well, I guess. Shouldn't we be going? Yes, night's catching up with us. I don't like the idea of being caught up with. Haha, if you are scared easily, you can't have much confidence in what you are doing. I haven't been at this business very long. Even the sound of the wind makes me nervous sometimes. That's because you still think of yourself as an ordinary thief. If you keep in mind that you are doing it for the good of the country, you will be alright. You always say that. I believe you, but something keeps telling me I'm not doing the right thing. You have to have the courage of your convictions. But the admonition sounded slightly unconvincing, as though Daiser was reassuring himself. The youth jumped lightly into the saddle and rode on ahead. Keep your eye on me, he called back over his shoulder. If I see anything, I will signal. The road made a long descent to the south. Iori watched from behind the stone Buddha for a minute, then decided to follow them. Somehow the idea had formed in his mind that these were the treasure house thieves. Once or twice they looked back cautiously, apparently finding nothing to warrant alarm. They seemed to forget about him after a time. Before long, the evening glow was gone, and it was too dark to see more than a few yards ahead. The two riders were almost at the edge of Musashino Plain when the youth pointed and said, "There, chief, you can see the lights of Ogimachiya." The road was flattening out. A short distance ahead, the Iruma River, twisting like a discarded obi, shone silvery in the moonlight. Iori was now being careful to remain inconspicuous. His idea that these men were the thieves had become a conviction, and he knew all about bandits from his days in Hotengahara. Bandits were vicious men who would commit mayhem over a single egg or a handful of red beans. Unprovoked murder was nothing to them. By and by they entered the town of Ogimachiya. Daiso lifted his arm and said, "Joter, we will stop here and have a bite to eat. The horses have to be fed and I would like a smoke." They tied the horses in front of a dimly lit shop and went outside. When inside, Joter stationed himself by the door, keeping his eyes on the boxes the whole time he was eating. When he was finished, he went out and fed the horses. Iori went into a food shop across the street, and when the two men rode off, he grabbed the last handful of his rice and ate it as he walked. They rode side by side now. The road was dark but leveled. "Joder, did you send a courier to Kiso?" "Yes, I took care of that." "What time did you tell them?" "Midnight. We should be there on schedule." In the still night, Iori caught enough of their conversation to know that Daiso called his companion by a boy's name, while Joder addressed the older man as chief. This might mean nothing more than that he was the head of a gang, but somehow Iori got the impression they were father and son. This made them not mere bandits, but hereditary bandits, very dangerous men he would never be able to capture by himself. But if he could stick with them long enough, he could report their whereabouts to the officials. The town of Kawagoe was fast asleep, as soundless as a swan in the dead of night. Having passed rows of darkened houses, the two riders turned off the highway and began climbing a hill. A stone marker at the bottom said, "Forest of the Head-Burying Mound" above. Climbing up through the bushes alongside the path, Iori reached the top first. There was a lone pine tree of great size, to which a horse was tied. Squatting at the base were three men dressed like ronin, arms folded on their knees, looking expectantly toward the path. Iori had hardly ensconced himself in a hiding place before one of the men stood up and said, "It's Daiso, all right." All three ran forward and exchanged jovial salutations. Daiso and his confederates had not met for nearly 4 years. Before long they got down to work. Under Daiso's direction, they rolled a huge stone aside and began digging. Dirt was piled to one side, a great store of gold and silver to the other. Choter unloaded the boxes from the horses and dumped out their contents, which, as Iori had suspected, consisted of the missing treasure from Mitsumine Shrine. Added to the previous cache, the total booty must have had a value of many tens of thousands of ryo. The precious metals were poured into plain straw sacks and loaded on 3 horses. The empty lacquer boxes, along with other objects had served their purpose, were dumped into the hole. After the ground had been smoothed over, the stone was restored to its original position. "That should do it," said Daiso. "Time for a smoke." He sat down by the pine tree and took out his pipe. The others brushed off their clothes and joined him. During the 4 years of his so-called pilgrimage, Daiso had covered the Kanto plain very thoroughly. There were few temples or shrines without a plaque attesting to his generosity, the extent of which was no secret. Strangely, though, no one had thought to ask how he had come by all this money. Daiso, Jotaro, and the 3 men from Kiso sat in a cycle for about an hour, discussing future plans. That it was now risky for Daiso to return to Edo was not in doubt, but one of them had to go. There was gold in the storehouse at Shibaura to be recovered and documents to be burned, and something had to be done about Akemi. Just before sun-up, Daiso and the 3 men began the journey down the Kosu High Road to Kiso. Jotaro, on foot, set off in the opposite direction. The stars Iori was gazing at offered no answer to his question. Who to follow? Under the transparently blue autumn sky, the strong rays of the afternoon sun seemed to sink right into Jotaro's skin. His head filled with thoughts of his role in the coming age. He was strolling across the Musashino plain as though he owned it. Casting a somewhat apprehensive glance behind him, he thought he stood there, thinking the boy might want to talk to him. He had already stopped a couple of times, but the boy had made no attempt to catch up with him. Deciding to find out what was going on, Jotaro chose a clump of ulalia and hid in it. When Iori reached the stretch of road where he had last seen Jotaro, he began looking around worriedly. Abruptly, Jotaro stood up and called out, "You there, Rent!" Iori gasped but recovered quickly. Knowing he couldn't get away, he walked on past and asked nonchalantly, "What do you want? You've been following me, haven't you?" Iori shook his head. Iori shook his head innocently. "I'm on my way to Juniso Nakano." You are lying. You were following me. I don't know what you're talking about. Iori started to break and run, but Jotaro caught him by the back of his kimono. Out with it. But I don't know anything, liar, said Jotaro, tightening his grip. Somebody sent you after me. You are a spy. And you are a lousy thief. What? Jotaro shouted, his face almost touching Iori's. Iori bent nearly to the ground, broke loose and took off. Jotaro hesitated a minute, then set off after him. Off to one side, Iori could see thatch roofs scattered about like wasp nests. He ran through a field of reddish autumn grass, kicking apart several dusty molehills. Help, help, thief, cried Iori. The small village he was entering was inhabited by families charged with fighting fires on the plain. Iori could hear a blacksmith hammer and anvil. People came running out of dark stables and houses where persimmons had been hanged to dry. Waving his arms, Iori panted, "The man with the bandana chasing me is a thief. Capture him, please. Oh, here he comes." The villager stared in bewilderment, some looking fearfully at the two youths, but to Iori's dismay, they made no move to capture Jotaro. "He's a thief. He stole from the temple." He stopped halfway through the village, conscious that the only thing disturbing the peaceful atmosphere was his own shouting. Then he took to his heels again and found a place to hide and catch his breath. Jotaro cautiously slowed down to a dignified walk. The villagers watched in silence. He certainly didn't look like either a robber or a ronin up to no good. In fact, he seemed like a clean-cut youth incapable of committing any kind of crime. Disgusted that the villagers, grown-ups, wouldn't stand up to a thief, Iori made up his mind to hurry back to Nakano, where he could at least present his case to people he knew. He left the road and struck out across the plain. Where he could see the cryptomeria grove behind the house, there was only a mile to go. Filled with relief, he changed his pace from a trot to a full run. Suddenly he saw that his way was blocked by a man with both arms outstretched. He didn't have time to figure out how Jotaro had got ahead of him, but he was on home ground now. He jumped back and drew his sword. "You bastard!" he screamed. Jotaro rushed forward empty-handed and caught Iori's collar, but the boy pulled free and jumped 10 feet to the side. "Son of a bitch!" muttered Jotaro, feeling warm blood running down his right arm from a 2-inch cut. Iori took a stance and fixed his mind on the lesson Musashi had drummed into him. Eyes, eyes, eyes. His strength concentrated in his bright pupils. His whole being seemed to be channeled into a pair of fiery eyes. Outstared, Jotaro whipped out his own sword. "I'll have to kill you," he snarled. Iori, taking fresh courage from the strike he had scored, charged his attack, the one he had always employed against Musashi. Jotaro was having second thoughts. He hadn't believed Iori could use a sword. Now he put his full strength into the fight. For the sake of his comrades, he had to get this meddling child out of the way. Seemingly ignoring Iori's attack, he pressed forward and swung viciously, but unsuccessfully. After 2 or 3 parries, Iori turned around and ran, stopped and charged again. When Jotaro countered, he retreated again, encouraged to see that his strategy was working. He was drawing the opponent into his own territory. Pausing to catch his breath, Jotaro looked around the dark grove and shouted, "Where are you, you stupid little bastard?" The answer was a shower of bark and leaves. Jotaro raised his head and shouted, "I see you," though all he could actually see through the foliage was a couple of stars. Jotaro started climbing toward the rustling sound Iori made as he moved out on a limb. From there, unfortunately, there was nowhere to go. "I've got you now. Unless you can grow wings, you better give up. Otherwise, you are dead." Iori moved silently back to the fork of two limbs. Jotaro climbed slowly and carefully. When Jotaro reached out to grab him, Iori again moved out on one of the limbs. With a grunt, Jotaro caught hold of a branch with both hands and started to pull himself up, giving Iori the chance he had been waiting for. With a resounding whack, his sword connected with the branch Jotaro was on. It broke and Jotaro plummeted to the ground. "How do you like that, thief?" gloated Iori. His fall broken by lower branches, Jotaro wasn't seriously injured except for his pride. He cursed and started back up the tree, this time with the speed of a leopard. While he was under Iori's feet again, Iori slashed back and forth with his sword to keep him from getting any nearer. While they were locked in a stalemate, the plaintive tones of a shakuhachi came to their ears. For a moment, they both stopped and listened. Then Jotaro decided to try reasoning with his adversary. "Alright," he said, "you put up a better fight than I expected. I admire you for that. If you will tell me who asked you to follow me, I will let you go. Admit you are lick. Are you crazy? I may not be very big, but I am Misawa Iori, the only disciple of Miyamoto Musashi. Begging mercy would be an insult to my master's reputation. Give up." What? Said Jotaro incredulously. Say that once more." His voice was shrill and unsteady. "Listen carefully," Iori said proudly. "I am Misawa Iori, the only pupil of Miyamoto Musashi. Does that surprise you?" Jotaro was ready to admit defeat. With a mixture of doubt and curiosity, he asked, "How is my teacher? Is he well? Where is he?" Astonished but keeping a safe distance from Jotaro, who was moving closer, Iori said, Sensei would never have a thief for a disciple." "Don't call me that. Didn't Musashi ever mention Jotaro?" "Jotaro? If you are really Musashi's pupil, you must have heard him mention my name sometime or other. I was about your age then." "That's a lie." "No, it isn't. It's the truth." Overcome with nostalgia, Jotaro reached out to Iori and tried to explain that they should be friends because they were disciples of the same teacher. Still wary, Iori took a swipe at his ribs. Squeezed precariously between two limbs, Jotaro barely succeeded in clasping his hands around Iori's wrist. For some reason, Iori let go of the branch he was holding onto. When they fell together, one landing on top of the other, both knocked senseless. The light in Musashi's new house was visible from all directions, since though the roof was in place, the walls hadn't been built yet. Takuan, arriving the day before for an after-the-storm call, had decided to wait for Musashi's return. Today, just after nightfall, his enjoyment of his solitary surroundings had been interrupted by a mendicant priest asking for hot water to go with his supper. After his meager meal of rice balls, the aged priest had taken it upon himself to play his shakuhachi for Takuan, fingering his instrument in a haunting, amateurish fashion. Yet as Takuan listened, the music struck him as having genuine feeling, albeit of the artless sort often expressed in poems by non-poets. He thought, too, that he could recognize the emotion the player was attempting to wring from his instrument. It was remorse, from the first off-key note to the last, a wailing cry of repentance. It seemed to be the story of the man's life, but then Takuan reflected, that couldn't have been too different from his own. Whether people were great or not, there was not much variety in their inner life experience. Any difference lay merely in how they dealt with common human weaknesses. To Takuan, both he and the other man were basically a bundle of illusions wrapped in human skin. I do believe I have seen you before somewhere, Takuan murmured thoughtfully. The priest blinked his almost sightless eyes and said, now that you mention it, I thought I recognized your voice. Aren't you Takuan Soho from Tajima? Takuan's memory cleared, moving the lamp closer to the man's face. He said, you are Aoki Tanzaemon, aren't you? Then you are Takuan. Oh, I wish I could crawl into a hole and hide this miserable flesh of mine. How strange we should meet in a place like this. It has been nearly 10 years since that time at the Shippoji, hasn't it? Thinking of those days gives me a chill. Then he said stiffly, now that I'm reduced to wandering about in darkness, this wretched sack of bones is sustained only by thoughts of my son. Do you have a son? I have been told he is with that man who was tied up in the old cryptomeria tree. Takezo, wasn't it? I hear he is called Miyamoto Musashi now. The two of them are said to have come east. You mean your son is Musashi's disciple? That's what they say. I was so ashamed. I couldn't face Musashi, so I resolved to put the boy out of my mind. But now he's 17 this year. If only I could have one look at him and see what kind of a man he is growing up to be. I would be ready and willing to die. So Jotaro's your son. I didn't know that, said Takuan. Tanzaemon nodded. There was no hint in his shriveled form of the proud captain filled with lust for Otsu. Takuan gazed at him with pity, pained to see Tanzaemon so tormented by guilt. Seeing that despite his priestly garb he lacked even the comfort of religious faith, Takuan decided the first thing he should do was bring him face to face with the Buddha Amida, whose infinite mercy saves even those guilty of the 10 evils and the 5 deadly sins. There would be time enough after he had recovered from his despair to look for Jotaro. Takuan gave him the name of a Zen temple in Edo. If you tell them I sent you, they will let you stay as long as you wish. As soon as I have time, I will come and we will have a long talk. I have an idea where your son might be. I will do everything I can to make sure you see him in the not too distant future. In the meantime, give up brooding. Even after a man's 50 or 60, he can still know happiness, even do useful work. You may live for many more years. Talk it over with the priest when you get to the temple. Takuan shooed Tanzaemon out the door unceremoniously, but without showing any sympathy. But Tanzaemon seemed to appreciate the unsentimental attitude. After numerous bows of gratitude, he picked up his reed hat and shakuhachi and left. For fear of slipping, Tanzaemon chose to go through the woods where the path sloped more gently. Presently, his cane struck an obstacle. Feeling around with his hands, he was surprised to find 2 bodies lying motionless on the damp ground. He hurried back to the cabin. Takuan, can you help me? I came across two unconscious boys in the woods. Takuan roused himself and came outside. Tanzaman continued, I don't have any medicine with me and I can't see well enough to get water for them. Takuan slipped on his sandals and shouted toward the bottom of the hill. His voice carried easily. A farmer answered, asking him what he wanted. Takuan told him to bring a torch, some men, and some water. While he waited, he suggested to Tanzaman that the road was the better way to go, described it in detail, and sent him on his way. Halfway down the hill, Tanzaman passed the men coming up. When Takuan arrived with the farmers, Jotaro had come too and was sitting underneath the tree, looking dazed. One hand resting on Iori's arm, he was debating whether to revive him and find out what he wanted to know or to get away from there. He reacted to the torch like a nocturnal animal, tensing his muscles, ready to run. What's going on here? Asked Takuan as he looked more closely. Inquisitive interest turned to surprise, a surprise matched by Jotaro's. The young man was much taller than the boy Takuan had known, and his face had changed quite a bit. You are Jotaro, aren't you? The youth placed both hands on the ground and bowed. Yes, I am, he replied haltingly, almost fearfully. He had recognized Takuan instantly. Well, I must say you have grown up to be a fine young man. Turning his attention to Iori, he put his arm around him and ascertained that he was still alive. Iori revived and after looking around consciously for a few seconds, burst into tears. What's the matter? Takuan asked soothingly. Are you hurt? Iori shook his head and blabbered, I'm not hurt, but they took my teacher away. He's in the prison in Chichibu. With Iori bawling the way he was, Takuan had trouble understanding him. But soon the basic facts of the story became clear. Takuan, realizing the seriousness of the situation, was nearly as grieved as Iori. Jotaro too was deeply agitated. In a shaky voice, he said abruptly, Takuan, I have something to tell you. Could we go somewhere where we can talk? He's one of the thieves, said Iori. You can't trust him. Anything he says will be a lie. He pointed accusingly at Jotaro, and they glared at each other. Shut up, both of you. Let me decide who's right and who's wrong. Takuan led them back to the house and ordered them to build a fire outside. Seating himself by the fire, Takuan commanded them to do likewise. Iori hesitated, his expression saying very plainly he had no intention of being friendly with a thief. But seeing Takuan and Jotaro talking amiably over old times, he felt a pang of jealousy and grudgingly took a seat near them. Jotaro lowered his voice and, like a woman confessing her sins before the Buddha, became very honest. For 4 years now, I have been receiving training from a man named Daiso. He comes from Nara in Kiso. I have learned about his aspirations and what he wants to do for the world. I would be willing to die for him if necessary. And that's why I have tried to help him with his work. Well, it does hurt to be called a thief, but I'm still Musashi's disciple. Even though I'm separated from him, I have never been apart from him in spirit, not even for a day. He hurried on, not wanting to be asked questions. Daiso and I have sworn by the gods of heaven and earth not to tell anyone what our aim in life is. I can't even tell you. Still, I can't stand by when Musashi has been thrown in prison. I will go to Chichibu tomorrow and confess. Takuan said, then it was you and Daiso who robbed the treasure house. Yes, Jotaro replied without the slightest sign of contrition. So you are a thief. said Takuan. Jotaro lowered his head to avoid Takuan's eyes. No, no, he murmured lamely. We are not just common burglars. I was not aware that thieves came in different varieties. Well, what I'm trying to say is we don't do these things for our own gain. We do them for the people. It's a matter of moving public property for the good of the public. I don't understand reasoning like that. Are you telling me your robberies are righteous crimes? Are you saying you are like the bandit heroes in Chinese novels? If so, it's a poor imitation. I can't answer that without revealing my secret agreement with Daiso. Haha, you aren't going to let yourself be taken in, are you? I don't care what you say. I will confess only to save Musashi. I hope you will put in a good word for me with him later. I wouldn't be able to think of a good word to put in. Musashi is innocent. Whether you confess or not, he will be freed eventually. It seems to me it's far more important for you to take yourself to the Buddha. Use me as an intermediary and confess everything to him. Buddha, that's what I said. To hear you tell it, you are doing something grand for the sake of other people. In fact, you are putting yourself before others. Has it not occurred to you that you leave quite a number of people unhappy? One can't consider himself when one is working on behalf of society. Stupid fool, he struck Jotaro soundly on the cheek with his fist. Oneself is the basic of everything. Every action is a manifestation of the self. A person who doesn't know himself can do nothing for others. What I meant, I wasn't acting to satisfy my own desires. Shut up. Don't you see you are barely grown? There's nothing more frightening than a half-baked do-gooder who knows nothing of the world but takes it upon himself to tell the world what's good for it. You needn't say any more about what you and Daiso are doing. I have a very good idea already. What are you crying about? Blow your nose. Ordered to bed, Jotaro lay down obediently but couldn't get to sleep for thinking of Musashi. He clapped his hands together over his chest and silently begged forgiveness. Tears dribbled into his ears. He turned on his side and began thinking about Otsu. His cheek hurt. Otsu's tears would hurt worse. Still, revealing his secret promise to Daiso was inconceivable. Even if Takuan tried to get it out of him in the morning, as he was sure to do. He got up without making a sound, went outside and looked up at the stars. He would have to hurry. The night was nearly gone. Stop! The voice froze Jotaro where he was. Behind him, Takuan was a huge shadow. The priest came to his side and put his arm around him. Are you determined to go and confess? Jotaro nodded. That's not very intelligent, said Takuan sympathetically. You will die a dog's death. You seem to think that if you give yourself up, Musashi will be set free. But it isn't that simple. The officials will keep Musashi in prison until you tell them everything you have been refusing to tell me. And you will be tortured until you talk, whether it takes a year, 2 years, or more. Jotaro hung his head. Is that what you want, to die a dog's death? But you have no choice now. Either you confess everything under torture or you tell me everything. As a disciple of the Buddha, I will not sit in judgment. I will relay it to Amida. Jotaro said nothing. There is one other way. By the sheerest chance, I happened to meet your father last night. He now wears the robes of a mendicant priest. Of course, I never dreamed you were here too. I sent him to a temple in Edo. If you have made up your mind to die, it would be good for you to see him first, and when you see him, you can ask him if I'm not right. Jotaro, there are three paths open to you. You must decide for yourself which one to follow. He turned away and started back into the house. Jotaro realized that the shakuhachi he had heard the night before must have belonged to his father. Without being told, he could imagine how his father must look and feel as he wandered around from place to place. Takuan, wait, I'll talk. I'll tell everything to the Buddha, including my promise to Daiso. He caught hold of the priest's sleeve and the